been able to see it. What Philip K. Dick book do you have back there?
It's the Philip K. Dick Reader. It's got a bunch of his most famous short stories in it. So it's just a big short story collection. It's good.
Yeah.
It's a lot of good stories.
And I also, that's a trouble light attached to a mic stand. Is that right?
Like this?
Yeah.
It's just a painter's light.
Or painter's light. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's right. Not the trouble light is the one that has like the light bulb is in prison and you hang it. But
yeah, no, right. It's literally just a trouble. I'm just like, I don't want to buy a lamp, and I have these around. So I have so many like old mic stands from being a musician who just like accumulates crap. Especially from when I did house shows, that the crap accumulation just exploded because people would leave stuff at my house. So this is like a kick mic stand. And now I'm old enough and I have enough money in the bank account that I would just pay to record at a studio for drums. But there was a whole period where that wasn't me. And I knew enough about recording to do it in my basement. So like basically every record I've put out until very recently, the drums are recorded in the basement, including the one that we made, right? Or no, did we do the drums in my house?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And this was used in that recording, but this is a piece of history right here. Go with your EP. And then I just, you just clip the painter's light onto that, and there you go. You have a lamp.
Yeah.
It's a cheap lamp.
So you're home right now?
Yes, this is my new home.
Did you move addresses?
I moved 3 blocks away from the back.
Okay. That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we hit record, I was referencing Bashar came up, and I wanted to close that circle, but for listeners, they'll be like, "What the fuck?" There's no. The context is that I'm not closing the circle. So, someone a friend that will go unnamed. His mom is how I found out about Bashar. She's very much into the UAP phenomena, channeling phenomena. And so I cannot remember, is Bashar a guy who's alive right now who channels a different entity, or is there a guy that channels Bashar who is like a disembodied soul?
Robin, you're in luck, because just yesterday I listened to the Dr. Mayim Bialik podcast of all fucking things, because my friend was telling me that I needed to learn more about Bashar, and he was on her podcast, which is totally baffling. Talk about people's.
Wait, this is Blossom.
Is that who Mayim Bialik is? Wasn't she? I thought she was on.
Well, okay, Big Bang Theory, right? Right,
yeah.
But before, I think
before that.
I think so. Yeah, but just to making sure I know who we're talking about.
I'm a little young for Blossom, but that was on when I was a baby. But yes, she also is the failed host of Jeopardy, because everyone likes Ken Jennings more because he's awesome, and she's no offense to her, I guess. But, yeah. Anyways, I was listening to her podcast because I respect her, despite what I just said. And I was mostly listening because I was like, what's the most recent like Bashar content that I could find? And it was really a podcast with Daryl Anka, who is the guy that channels Bashar. So Daryl Anka is this guy who he channels Bashar. Bashar is a hybrid alien who lives 500,000 light years away, plus in a parallel reality. But there's like sort of when they asked Daryl about how it all works, he described something akin to like some versions of Hinduism, where there's kind of like the whole of reality is a conscious experience, and so once you realize that, you can just be anywhere in this physical space immediately. You don't need propulsion or warp drives or things. You can just be right there. And so he's channeling Bashar. Bashar is another creature who he has this relationship with, who tends to tell him, like basic pop psychology things, which if I was an alien from another reality, I'm not sure that that's what I would be downloading into everyone's brains, but I might do something else, or I might just chitter and make weird noises that he couldn't understand. But
to be fair, or maybe unfair, I don't know, but Daryl Anka, or however you say his last name, it kind of depends on, I would imagine, it depends on the question. Just like you as a guest, right? Talk about untapped dimensions of like timelines. We literally, based on what I ask you, we'll go left instead of right. And in all the other dimensions and timelines where that didn't happen, parallel universe, Robin asked this instead of that. There's so much potential. So, but there's a little bit of, more than a little bit of responsibility on my part to ask the question. So, you know, can't just say like, oh, Bashar, you know, why is he just giving these pop psychology things? Like, what about Daryl? How come Daryl isn't asking the hard hitting questions? Huh? I mean,
well, he did. He also said during the interview that early on, he asked Bashar how the alien spaceships work. And he explained the whole consciousness thing. You can just appear anywhere that you want in reality instantaneously once you realize it's all the dream of the dreamer, kind of, you know, what is it? Atman, Brahman, you know, Atman into Brahman, that kind of stuff. And it took 1 second to download the information, but 3 days to write it all out, to really sort of understand how the aliens move and all this kind of stuff. And it all felt to me like this is just, to be critical or cynical about it. It just felt like basic, like Eastern philosophy, Hindu derived Eastern philosophy about how to live your life to the fullest, and sort of somewhere between Hindu and panpsychist kind of thoughts on all of reality being based in consciousness rather than matter. And then right after all of that's established, he just kind of inserted aliens, and then we have Daryl. So it's like all of this very deep philosophical stuff, which is very interesting and useful, and then aliens, and then Daryl. And the aliens thing is like the thing that it brings up for me is, are we saying like they used to call them deities or gods in the ancient times, as that sort of interstitial between these big ideas about the Brahman and everything, and the universal consciousness, and then us. You had to have the deities there to deliver that information. And now we're just calling them aliens because that's the type of people in the sky that we believe in 2026. But there's another element to it, which is like, he said 2026 is the year of disclosure. 2027, we're going to actually see the aliens. And then for the next several decades, we'll be slowly introduced to more and more aliens until we're brought into the thing. And it gave me like
hold on, pause. Brought into the thing? Can we double click on that?
Brought to the Galactic Federation, or I don't know, brought into awareness of all of the grand, like the Palladians and the Greys and the cricket people. And I don't know, there's so many aliens, right? We're going to be brought into that over the next several decades, kicking and screaming because people won't accept it. They'll say it's AI, blah, blah, blah. But it's happening now, because if it doesn't happen soon, we're going to nuke ourselves. But he's also talking about soul contracts and stuff like that. In the midst of
this circled it before we went on mic. How it came up.
So I'm like that, but that just sounds like that sort of, you know, music festival Hinduism meets Scientology stuff that I used to encounter when I would go play shows at jam band festivals back in the day. And it's like there's some snake oily elements to that, which is not me not believing. It's me just being a critical thinker. Yeah. And then the funniest thing was, after all of that, Bialik asks him a question. She says like, so you've talked a lot about the importance of creativity and connecting with your soul. And could you say a little bit more about that? And he's like, yes, that's why me and my wife have just opened an escape room in like downtown Albuquerque or wherever they live. And like, they own an escape room business. What are we talking about? Like,
aren't you supposed to open an ashram and like teach people?
I don't want to put that maybe the escape
I know,
room.
I understand. I'm joking. But I'm countering your disbelief of like an escape room, like in terms of like, you know, my calling in life is to help people uncover riddles and crack codes and stuff.
I also find it very convenient that Bashar is not Daryl, because that means that Daryl can kind of be like, well, if Bashar gave bad advice, not my problem. I'm not the hybrid alien from an alternate dimension. I didn't say it. I don't know.
Here's my respectful pushback on that, which I could do the same thing. I'll just, maybe it's my ego flaring up, but the most proximal comparison is me right here and now as a podcaster. And from the internal family systems framework, I could say, look, the majority of the time I'm on mic for solo episodes, for guest interviews, I'm being led by a part. So anything that I say that's controversial or that gets my license taken away, hey, that's just the part. I didn't do it. It's just the part, right?
Yeah.
Which is complete. That's not. There's a failure of taking accountability and responsibility for your role in channeling a part, if we want to use that word, right? Or Daryl's role in delivering a message to a non-insignificant sized audience, which has implications, no matter what his intent, how positive his intentions are. He's not off the hook for wise discernment about what to share and what not to share. That said, I understand that there's a flow state, and you just, sometimes it's nice to be able to just go with whatever. I mean, especially, again, kind of relating to my own experience, when I'm in a trance state and something happens, of course, my skeptic or cynic or like, this is make believe. You're just making that up, Robin. You're just taking something that you read in a book and applying it to this experience right now, or whatever the voice says.
Yeah.
The opposite is, I'm just going to go with what I'm seeing. I'm just going to go with what I'm hearing, right? And that flow, that openness, that non-critical,
yes,
right? But it's not entirely non-critical, because you experience the presence of the critic or the skeptic being like, chatter, chatter, chatter. Hey, don't fucking be gullible. Don't be foolish. Don't be swindled. All that stuff. So when you talk about being, just to come back to the jam band Scientology, it's like you have every right to be skeptical, and as you should. I had a newfound appreciation for the skeptic. Our girls are now in public schools, and they're in elementary school. And one of the presentations, a nurse came in. I don't know if elementary schoolers are vaping, or they're just like, you're, 4th or 5th grade. They're like, you'll be in middle school, and the middle schoolers are vaping, bubblegum vapes or whatever. And they're like, we need to talk to the elementary schoolers so we can like get them on the right path before they, you know what I mean? So the extreme example that the nurse gives is like, oh, one time a kid used a vape one time and their lungs exploded, right? And like, that's an extreme example. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm saying when you deliver a message using that kind of scare tactic, we'll call it, you're traumatizing kids with, kids have very powerful imaginations.
right.
And so my daughter comes home, I pick her up from school, and she's in the back of the car, and she's telling me what she learned. There's a sidebar here. I won't go in it. It's too much ADHD here. But for reasons that I won't name right now, I don't say, how was your day, right away. I don't do that. That's a no, and maybe we can get into that later. So I just pick up my daughter and go, and she tells me unprompted about what she learned in school, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, oh, sweetheart, you don't know that daddy vapes. like it's okay, right? But I'm and then she's like, oh, and my friend told me, like, if you touch this, that it gets in your blood. And so I'm thinking, like, oh yeah, she doesn't have the kind of skeptic that you and I have, or even that a middle schooler has, right? Like that skeptic is well developed over years and years and years of experiences. And much of the time when I encounter skeptics in my own work or working with clients in the past, before this experience, I was always like, okay, skeptics have every right. And they're also sort of mucking up the process right now because they keep deeper healing from happening. And I just had this way reinvigorated, bolstered, resurrected, I don't know. Easter was just yesterday. This newfound appreciation of the skeptic. Like, my God, how much does the skeptic protect us from needless suffering? Like, if my daughter had a skeptic, she would not be having this distressing experience right now. So I'm her dad. So when she's having it, it affects me in a different way than anyway. So you're back to like the incredible claims about, to bring listeners back to what you said in a very short bit of time, we're going to be integrated into the Galactic Federation. We didn't mention the reptilians, but like anytime anyone talks about this stuff, they're like Alex Jones or Scientology, or just like, this is crazy. This is the kind of stuff that, like, why are we giving this airtime? This is obviously nonsense, and it should be ridiculed and dismissed. and
well, I don't know that it's obviously nonsense. I won't just to
okay, all right.
my position on this. I don't know that it's obviously nonsense. I think that
I'm role playing the skeptic.
no, but, well, yes, and we can talk about the skeptic in a second. But just to clarify, I don't
Yeah.
think that it's obviously nonsense.
Mhm.
I am right on the flying Melendez fucking wire, walking across, doing this, whatever, tightrope, whatever it's called, walking across, letting my skeptic and my curious believer or whatever just have a conversation about this, because in recent years, in the work that I've been doing with my clients and in the work I've been doing with myself,
Mhm.
there's been a lot more openness to these sort of obvious ontological questions. What is reality? Like,
Yes.
what is it made up of? The sort of more basic claims about like what's the relationship between matter and consciousness is actually very interesting to me, and does fall into that like sort of Atman versus Brahman kind of like Hindu light Buddhism, diet Buddhism, that kind of territory. I am very interested in that, and also interested in how it seems to be dovetailing in interesting ways with physics and quantum theory and things like that.
Yeah.
There's something interesting going on there that explains more of what it means to be in this reality, experiencing something beyond just the sort of raw materialist, like I'm just meat on a rock that has some sense of being alive and then it won't anymore later. Doesn't really answer the question of like, yeah, but what is the meat and what is the rock and what is everything? Why is this here? Right. So these deeper questions are very interesting to me. The thing is, they are so basic and so widespread, it's very easy to take a little piece of that curiosity and really radically like malform it into something that is ugly or gross or misleading or unnecessary. And so the skeptic is there to help me kind of balance that. And now going to the idea of the skeptic real quick, just like you've brought up internal family systems, IFS,
It was never going to happen in this conversation.
your favorite. And you probably remember that I have some I wouldn't say qualms exactly, but I have critiques of every model of therapy. But I have critiques in return to IFS. Probably my skeptic, as you would say, having critiques of the model, and that there's something going on there. But to me, like one way I think about the skeptic, if I'm taking more of a maybe like a CBT lens, cognitive behavioral therapy lens, anything in that realm of therapy, is that I'm actually doing a lot of work often with clients to invite the skeptic into the conversation, because there's far too much of listening to automatic, intrusive thoughts that are like that have no logical base, let's say rational, have no rational basis, and that are just feeding into anxiety and depression symptoms. And the skeptic is actually a very necessary part that I need to bring in to be like, yeah, but can we interrogate that idea for a second? Walk me through how that makes sense. And when we start walking through it, you suddenly realize that idea made no sense, and I was working myself up into an anxious tizzy for no reason. The skeptic was an absolutely essential component of making that happen for the client. That's not what every client needs, but many clients I find need that.
Yeah, no, well said. Absolutely. In terms of just not that the therapist is challenging the client, the therapist is making room for the client to challenge themselves, or and for the skeptic to challenge another part of them that's giving them these automatic thoughts. And again, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we stay on the fairgrounds. we don't blast off.
Well, I don't know. I feel like I do, but maybe that means I'm not doing CBT anymore. But I don't think so, because CBT is one of those models where it's like the ground floor is the cognition and the behaviorism, but as it grows and as times change, it just starts pulling other stuff in and saying like, well, this is part of CBT now too.
You know what?
Anything can fit.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think I'm probably not fairly categorized. Like I'm presuming that your garden variety CBT therapist is going to take hallucinations or talk of angels or demons as at least part of the therapist will be like, okay, sounds like there's some psychosis here. versus like the bridge between spiritual phenomena and putting it in a DSM medical academic framework versus the spiritual lens. I go ahead.
What I say to my students who have that perspective, like they believe about that's what CBT is, I always kind of turn around and say, to me, what CBT is all therapy is the application of philosophy through a clinical lens. So it depends what the philosophy is in terms of what it is that we're applying. But CBT to me, unlike the OG psychoanalysis, which is like broadly like any philosophy, right? There's specific psychoanalytic philosophies, but psychodynamic philosophies more broadly. But CBT is like science is the philosophy. But if you take science as the philosophy, science, modern science, does not throw out things like panpsychism, or in fact, physics is like really obsessed with that stuff right now because of quantum theory. And so if you're being a true scientist who is open and rational, you're inviting in all of this stuff as being super relevant to the client experience and to how they are, let's say, consciously perceiving. It's also why mindfulness, I think, has become such a big part of CBT. The garden variety CBT therapists, not to make fun of them, I guess, but they're going to be more likely to fall into the trap of applying everything mechanically. Like, you have to do your mindful breathing practice so that you can get calm enough to realize where you're making errors in your thinking so that you can stop being so depressed. Whereas the more expansive CBT therapist might be like, well, we can use mindfulness or not, but the point of it is to get in touch with the whole experience and then be scientists about what that experience is, which could extend way outside the fairgrounds, depending on what the client's willing to talk about and the ways in which it is or is not relevant to their problem.
Yes, I agree with all that. And
my defense of CBT.
No. Actually, what I appreciate your advocacy for. And again, I explicitly named them as assumptions, right? Fair or unfair, but your advocacy for the person, the individual who's leveraging CBT. It's actually it's the individual and how tight or narrow or open or wide their worldview is, how flexible they are as a thinker. Can they hold? The assumption I make is the CBT therapist is, from an IFS lens, largely manager driven. That the manager part is saying, here's what I learned, here's what works, here's what the evidence suggests will be the most efficacious way and therefore ethical way to help this client alleviate their suffering. We're going to stick to the boom, boom, boom. Not stick to this like super rigid, but just belief in that model. And I view, which is not fair, but I view it as like manager driven versus.
By the way, you're saying it's not fair, but that might actually be more accurate to what most CBT therapists are doing, but that's not
many other models, by the way,
many other
not
models,
the CBT.
Yes. But maybe I'm expressing something that's more in the minority in terms of like what CBT is or can be. But to me, it is that idea of like just like you said, it's about the openness of the therapist, right? And then the model is kind of like the boat that we're riding on, but we're going wherever the client is taking. The client is the river, I guess, and we're going wherever that river is taking us. But there's a way to do that, which is like I'm framing the questions through the parts language. There's a way to do that, which is I'm framing the questions through the scientific lens. So it's not like, you said that a moment ago, like, here's what the evidence tells us, and so I'm imposing that on you. My way of doing CBT is more like, what is the evidence? So it's like, rather than asking the client, what is the evidence telling you? Like, we are both going to be scientists together about what we think this means. And I will impart occasionally psychoeducational information that might further frame the question to the client, but I'm actually inviting them to be a scientist as opposed to I'm a scientist telling them what to do, which that's maybe more just like straight up behavioral therapy from the old days. This cognitive behavioral thing now is more like that invitation into being a scientist about their experience, which could be very wide ranging and cover all kinds of territory. But it comes back to like, what's the thinking? What are the cycles? What are the components? Let's try to structure this in a way that's helpful to you.
Yeah. 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 And that word structure, I want to just piggyback on, because like if we go back to the boat, a metaphor, or like if a sea monster completely swallows the boat with the client and the therapist in it and pulls it down into the depths of hell, a lot of therapists are going to get scared. They're not going to be, their training is not going to equip them to navigate that territory in a skillful way, or maybe they think they will, but so I guess I'm just like, rather than hanging out in the bell curve, I like purposely like when I'm interested in the tail experiences. And yeah, this being in what IFS calls self is the most protective thing that any client, anything that would make you afraid, you're not afraid. And the lack of fear is not irresponsible. It allows you to have this persistent, calm, clear-sighted, loving acceptance of whatever is happening. So that like, let me use your example of seeing an opportunity. You're in a flow state and you see an opportunity to invite your client to be a co-scientist with you or whatever. Like, oh, well, like, let's ask this question. Does that make sense? And that sort of losing my train of thought where I wanted to start. Self is it's like it's effortless. It doesn't take any energy. It doesn't feel like it does. It's effortless. So I did a session with someone and there were all these different things to keep track of. Very complicated. Over a period of an hour plus, right? And she's like, how did you keep track of all of that? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't feel any striving or pedaling a bike uphill. None of that. It was all so effortless. So there's this capacity that is just not available in ordinary consciousness, in ordinary life. So it's so weird. Sometimes therapists talk about, like, if they're stressed out in their normal life, like whatever's in their life is stressing them out, like when they come to session and they're with clients, it's like,
oh yeah,
vacation from that. Because
I say that all the time to my students who are saying, how do I balance schoolwork and therapy? And I'm like, because they have to do 3 to 6 hours of class in the morning and then however many clients in the evening, and they gotta go to work. It's brutal. The program we both went through, brutal. But then I'm also like, yeah, but the part where you're with the client, first of all, the real reason you came here was to sit with the clients. So this is the point of being in the program. This is the creme de la creme of the whole thing, is this moment. And also you can just oasis yourself away from all those other issues and just hyper focusing on the client. And it's a wonderful release. You not only should you not be thinking, not only can you use that space to not think about other stuff, you shouldn't be thinking about other stuff because you're supposed to be focused on the client. Now, will you think about other stuff? Yes. But, you always have the excuse to be like, wait, I don't have to think about my paper right now because I'm supposed to be listening to Robin. So refocus on Robin.
Or when something creeps into your awareness when you're in the present moment with your client, there was even a part of me that was like rejecting the framing of being hyper focused, because that also feels like squinting versus like the relaxed open field, right? Like where there is openness to be like, oh fuck, we should have eaten the chicken yesterday, we're gonna have to throw it out. like that just comes in, and then you're aware of it but it doesn't take you away from being present, and then you're able to just like, that's like the little fly, and it doesn't bother you. Sure. It's that your mind doesn't contract and it's like, oh fuck, I should have, or a mosquito, I should have put bug spray. Nothing like that. There's no agitation, there's no tension or contraction. There's the open field of awareness that comes in, and it's not a problem, doesn't take your presence away.
Totally agree.
Because the capacity is so much larger than ordinary consciousness. You were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, initially you were framing that as the self that you enter, which is explanatory from an IFS perspective,
or no self from the Buddhist perspective, the anatta.
No self. But I would say that it's merely describing a state that is reflective of the best therapy from the therapist perspective, the area that I can inhabit that will allow me to best serve the client, right? But that state, there's an explanation for it within any model. So there's also always this thing about like the common factors stuff. This is very much a common factors thing. Is the IFS might call it self, but if I'm doing DBT or ACT or IBCT or any of these cognitive behavioral models, the modern explanation would be a more like science forward flow state explanation of where I went, or even a Diet Buddhism forward thing about presence, mindfulness, whatever, that allowed me to be there and to be present and to be able to track and follow all those pieces to do the classic, taking the jumbled yarn and turning it into like a nice, scarf for the client to wear as they exit the therapy, right? Every therapy is doing some version of that. And the stance that we are both talking about could be described or explained in
a different name.
Different names. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's something I want to come back to about this consciousness component about have we talked at all, either on air or not, about telepathy tapes? Did I tell you about that show?
We may have discussed it briefly. I have not actually listened to it yet. It's on my things.
Okay. I bring it up just because earlier when we were talking about like the material paradigm or awareness and dimensions and consciousness, and you don't need to engineer some sort of propulsion system to go to another place in the universe because the materialist paradigm sees consciousness as emergent, not foundational.
Right.
And if that's wrong, and consciousness is foundational, then it's really just a matter of like, I would use maybe a psychedelic term here of like gating functions, right? Like the fact that you and I are both not tripping balls right now allows us to have a coherent conversation in this frequency, right? But if we open up the doorways of perception, then our conscious experiences will be vastly different, and that phenomena that we interact with in those realms are some people call them more, it's like the to speak for the fear perspective, it would be, I'm losing my mind. I'm scared about it. I've lost touch with reality. I'm having a psychotic break. I need to call 911. That's what fear would say without having any kind of orientation, or even if you're not oriented, right? Like just like, I'm not safe. I'm not okay. And I'm losing my mind, versus no fear, none. And you're blasting off through untold experiences with agents, beings that have free will and are interacting with you or not, and I don't know. It's there's a reason why this stuff is referred to as ineffable, because the moment I try to talk about it, I feel like I'm not only losing you listeners, but I'm losing myself in terms of like what point I'm trying to make. It's just the idea that like when you were describing, you don't have to like go somewhere to go somewhere, kind of. You don't have to physically go somewhere to go somewhere consciously. That's right. What I wanted to say about it was, not only is that right, but I feel like the only way someone can also see that that's right, by right I mean true, is to actually walk, follow the yellow brick road, like go down the rabbit hole.
Right.
You can't. There's no way. There is just no way that you can take anyone's word for it. So therefore, I feel like this is a challenge that not just psychedelic adventurers have, but even in religion, like people that make religious claims. It's like,
What
Yeah.
what I'd say is that there are many ways to get to where you're talking about, which I think is a very interesting thing. So for anyone out there who's thinking Robin's saying you have to take psychedelic drugs, I would say
No, that's not what I'm saying.
That's
That's
what
not. I would say, or enter a somnambulistic trance state. It's like what's half a dozen, six of one. It's like the same thing.
there's many ways to get there. I've recently been reading a lot about Advaita Vedanta, which is a type of Hinduism, where unlike other forms of Hinduism and Buddhism, where the mindful meditation practice, or just whatever meditation practice that they're doing, is central to accessing the type of awareness of like a different this alternate way of being conscious, or consciousness in general, is necessary. Like you have to meditate your way there, like start from the very smallest and you slowly expand out. The Advaita Vedantins are like, no, it's actually a logical exercise. They just hammer the logic and the rationality, and they have a series of questions that they ask over time that eventually leads you into an awareness of like, oh, there is not another way to understand reality other than this, which is super interesting, because you can also get there by like taking a huge dose of ketamine, or you could also get there, which I've done, or you can get there by meditation, or you could get there by near-death experience, or you could get there by a variety of other pathways. I don't know what it actually is. I don't know if any of this stuff about moving anywhere, I don't know if it's true. Like you said, it's true. You can go anywhere. I know that it is true that there are other ways of experiencing my consciousness that totally defy what I typically experience on a day-to-day basis. And I can get there through meditation. I can really get there instantly through certain psychedelic substances. And there's probably other ways to get there as well. And it opens up a lot of doors of inquiry and questions, but I think I'm fundamentally agnostic about what any of it actually means. But it's interesting, right? Like the idea of like consciousness being the base rather than matter is a great place to start. If that were true, what would some of these different things mean? And I love that metaphor you hear of like we're all a reflection of sunshine in a dewdrop. Right? But like we're all the sun, but our experience of ourselves is the reflection, the specific photon coming off of that dewdrop. But there's many other dewdrops around us, which are also sunlight, but it's all the same sunlight, right? It's a really interesting way of very simply framing what is meant by consciousness is the base, and then everything else is arising up out of that. And then what does that mean? And sometimes you can get to new understandings of what it might mean, or a piece of it, through logical, rational exploration, like that Advaita Vedanta thing. And sometimes you get there through pure experience. For me, I've been experiencing over the last several years a little bit of both, where like all day I'm talking to people about their inner worlds. So I'm like primed constantly for thinking about self and reality and matter and consciousness and whatever. And then I'm reading a lot about this stuff, which is opening my mind to different perspectives. And then also in pursuing more education on psychedelic assisted therapy, I've tried ketamine in a controlled environment. And one discussion I had right after coming out of that with another therapist that really was very useful. Talking about, people always say that phrase pure consciousness, which is another one of those things like you were talking about, where it's like, the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Yeah. And actually we were talking about it, and the best word I would use to describe it, which some people might push back on, is like the pure consciousness was not good, not bad, but maybe a little boring. Meaning there was just everything and nothing at the same time. And there was nothing really to do. And the point was kind of made between, I forget who said what, but the point was kind of made between us of like, that's kind of the form, or like the plane of reality that you and I are on right now, having this conversation. There's enough restrictions that there's actually something to do. And when and then when you go back to the sunlight, so as the dewdrop, there's a lot to do. But when I go back to the sunlight, when I'm in that mode, whether it's meditation or drugs or whatever, when I'm there, I'm like, there isn't really anything to do, which is fine, but I can understand why I might end up here. I don't know if that means anything. I don't know if that's just me hallucinating because I'm on drugs, or
these are the questions. These are the questions that egos will ask. And back to your point about like there's different pathways there. That's exactly right. And I think that anytime conversations like these break open, or anyone in two human beings are having a conversation about this stuff, you just have to factor in the ego. The ego is going to tear apart any claims about certainty. The ego's like, fuck you. Where's your humility? You don't know. No one knows. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's what I mean. It does that all the time. And this is kind of what I mean by like, but once you just have to take. The Christians say, taste and see, right? You just have to you have to see it for yourself. And the thing is, like, I remember the guy, not Rupert Sheldrake. What's the dude's name? From Johns Hopkins. He passed away. He did the like mystic question. He very scientific. He had like questionnaires for mystical experiences. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he most people when they did the psychedelic, it's like end of life. Like people are going to die. Yeah. And they're open to make that transition, the death transition, because again, ego is going to be like, he just said death transition. Death's the end. Is death the end? Egos want to know. The death transition, people relax, they calm down because they taste and see. They're like, oh, consciousness survives the body. I don't have to be so like neurotic about all this anymore. They relax because they've seen past the threshold. And not and they're not like, was that real? Not only have they seen past the threshold, they're like, was that real is a boring question. It doesn't apply. It is. So, and I don't have to convince anyone else. I'm calm. I'm gonna die. And that's just a level up. That's from going from fifth grade to sixth grade or kindergarten to first grade. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's the biggest takeaway. I mean, there were so many little takeaways, like the thing about it's boring to be pure consciousness. So you like that's an interesting idea to play with. I had many of those types of ideas, but the biggest takeaway that I had was that like that death anxiety, which was very prominent beforehand, just kind of went away because I hadn't been able to experience. I hadn't had a conscious experience like that until I had done that, the ketamine. And then after that, I was like, oh, okay, like, I feel completely differently about this now. This is pushing much further past what I had been able to access through meditation much more quickly.
Yes.
But only because of meditation, I think I was able to actually like consume and handle it.
I believe it.
Right. Yeah. But I had done just enough of the meditating and of the self-exploration through becoming a therapist and all that stuff to be able to handle it, and came back with that lack of anxiety about it. But I'm still, because I'm doing the scientist thing, I'm still completely willing to accept that this is a material reality. So if I flip it back the other way, that it is a material reality, and that the human conscious experience is just an immensely complex computer going on in my brain somehow that will be explained at some point in the future, how the different chemicals and whatnot passing back and forth is carrying.
Explained by who?
Great question. but I'm willing to accept the possibility still, of course, that it's all me. And there's actually because I'm Jewish, right? Used to be religiously Jewish, not really ever super, but certainly culturally Jewish, right? There's choose life is like a famous thing that comes out of Jewish culture. Like you always do the thing to choose life. And also skepticism is a very important part of the culture. I have a funny story about that, but it's a very important part of the culture that stems all the way back to the most ancient rabbis, or whatever they would have been called back then, arguing with each other about whether God was real, which was kind of different than what a lot of other religions were doing at the time, like allowing for that uncertainty. And the conclusion to that is that you should still work as hard as you can to make this world and this reality as good as you can. Yeah. Because all of this shit that Robin and I are talking about is very interesting, very mind expanding and heart opening and all the kind of things that you want to say. that can come through from this sort of exploration, it might all still just be meat at the end of the day, in which case the thing that actually matters is the meat suffering that's going on in the world and all around us. And so like we should still fly to the moon, you know. We should still figure out nuclear energy, global warming, war. Like we should address these things, not only for the spiritual sort of reasons we were just discussing, but also just for the, you know, on the ground suffering meat space kind of perspective, especially if that is the only truth.
That's right. If none of this means anything, it still matters to treat people with dignity, with kindness, and to alleviate suffering or reduce suffering as much as possible. For sure. And that goes into the like the good evil thing, where like when you're talking about if you could just like zoom out of everything and you're like, oh, this is just boring. It's just like everything and nothing. But I would say there's a love component that is very, very palpable that might have been, if you're in a space where it's just like absent. I mean, love is a part of everything. If you want to say everything and nothing, this like the non-dual space where you have the opposites and you also can be the one aware of the both opposites at the same time. Paradoxes are not a problem. There's the good evil thing in this plane of existence. There's the good evil thing, and human beings talk about good and evil outside of this plane of existence, you know, in the spiritual realms. You were talking about deities earlier, and I've heard it once said that God, you know, you were talking about constraints and how that, like, when you put a constraint on something, that can make it more interesting. If there's no constraints, it's like, well, it's all available.
Yeah.
That gets old. And there's which is a hard idea to fathom. I mean, again, everything we're obviously, it goes without saying, but everything that we're talking about can only be reckoned with by the human mind, which is limited, right? But I've heard it said before that God, well, let me go back to IFS for just a second. Of all the qualities that IFS calls self, Dick calls them the 8 C's, and curiosity and calm and confidence, compassion, creativity, and so on. You can't have a healing experience without the curiosity. Curiosity is a prerequisite. You need curiosity. In fact, if there's an order of operations, I don't know the order of all of them, but curiosity is the first one. It's absolutely the first one without curiosity. So, and I've heard it said before. So I preface this by kind of highlighting the importance of curiosity in the healing process. I've heard it said that God, the reason why evil is allowed is through curiosity. It's through the constraint. If you have a separation of light and darkness and good and evil, it's like, what's gonna happen? It's not like some fucked up thing like let's like drown the ants and see if they can swim. It's not like a mustache twirling villain. It's just like a what's possible. And so having, you know, different wisdom traditions have their own lore about the separation of light and dark and evil and good, but curiosity, it's like if God gets curious, like, so how can the universe experience itself if it's just one? You need two to have a relationship. But also, if you know everything, you can't learn anything. And so there's this separation of curiosity is, I don't know, like inherent to the structure of being, and therefore you have to separate so that you can learn lessons. This would sound maybe more like Hinduism, but like you're learning lessons, you're incarnating again to learn lessons. And we as humans, by the way, we can pressure test this right now. I invite all listeners just to play with this claim. The lesson will be repeated until it's learned. It will be repeated. Just pay attention to your life day to day, week to week, month to month. If you haven't learned, and I've heard people say like, I can't wait to make new mistakes. It's like, yeah, that's right. If you make the same mistake, you will keep making it, but that means you haven't learned the lesson. But if you learn the lesson, then you just move on to the next lesson.
Mm.
And so separation, incarnating, dying, resting, coming back I've heard it conceptualized that Earth's a school from different traditions, different wisdom traditions, as well as like modern healing modalities like hypnosis.
And Bashar says that.
Well, then that's, that doesn't, to me, when I hear another angle that verifies something that I'm already holding, I'm just like, I'm already in. I'm already bought. I'm buying what's being sold. So when another tradition is verifying it, I'm just like, well, okay, that makes sense.
I remain not bought. Just to clarify.
Yeah.
I perhaps the lesson I need to learn or something. I remain out on the edge, listening to you say all this and think like the more you talk about what it might be, or like, and of course you're being careful, and I think it's good to sort of remain in this space of like, I can't say definitively what it is, but the curiosity is taking me there. I hear that, and even still I have this reaction where I'm like, let me pull back into my curious space. I'm allowing for this to be a quote unquote school, whatever that means in the end, but I'm not accepting that as the truth. I'm here to be curious and interested in what you have to say about it, what other traditions have to say about it, because I do feel as though the answers I've received from hard science physics all the way over to like, Bashar on the other end,
the wooest of the woo,
like everything in between, I haven't heard a convincing explanation. The only thing that's been really meaningful was my own experience, but my own curious experience, like just like you're saying, the only thing that's been meaningful, the everything that I've said about like my increased awareness of the connectedness between everything, my increased awareness of like the pure consciousness being kind of boring and needing to slim down to like learn something, like all of this feels meaningful. I don't know if it's just meat space experience, just neurons firing, and I'm thinking in things in strange new ways, because dogs think of things differently than I do. Bears think of things differently than I do. You think of things differently than I do. It could just be I'm having an experience in this brain, and it'll be an interesting conscious experience, and then I'll end.
Exactly.
But it can also be more or less, or I don't know. So I'm remaining open and curious of that. But I wanted to just very quickly say on the point about the school thing. I don't know if I differ necessarily from a lot of traditions, but one thing that I really picked up on strongly in my own experience exploring this that doesn't get brought up as much in other experiences is a lot of other traditions, especially older traditions, seem to imply that the sun in my Sun and Dewdrops example is all-knowing, and then like you said, all-knowing would be boring, and so in order to learn something or be curious, you have to put limitations. But in my experience, I feel more as though if consciousness is one great big, if all of this is one consciousness, it doesn't know anything. It is as confused as I am. So rather than being all-knowing, it just doesn't know anything, and it's learning about itself.
Yes, that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
it's still learning. It's still growing. What I was gonna say is I can't learn a lesson for you. So you're exactly right to pull back and say, I'm not blind. Like that's exactly the right response. Not to evaluate it as right or wrong, but like that response makes sense, and it makes sense from the assumption that like, you can kind of like, I'm thinking of like parents that are like, you can learn from someone else's mistake, like don't make that mistake. You learn from what they did, and then you don't have to suffer the way they did. You can just say, okay, yeah, I won't do heroin or whatever it is, like.
Okay, but that's very critical, because I think it shapes a lot of my approach to this. I'm not really that interested in, well, I think I'm interested in learning about what all of this is from just a learning perspective. I did get a PhD, so obviously I like learning stuff. I like torturing myself to learn. There's something there, right? But what I'll say is, like, for any listeners out there who are like, I've lost track of what they're talking about, like an hour ago, I would just say that if they're still here, if they didn't turn this off already, I would just say that some of this growing awareness is about practicality, like, and pragmatism, actually. What leads to the best living? So one of the human projects from the beginning of time has been to figure out how best to live on this strange rock with limited resources that we are living on.
That's right. You don't have to figure out iguana ethics. You're a
Right.
human. You have to
Right.
figure out how to live a human life.
How to live a human life. One of my favorite things is in Jungian psychology, he has all the archetypes. And I don't know if I read this or if I came up, you know what it was? I was reading Watership Down. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
No, I haven't.
But in Watership Down, he like constantly makes the author constantly makes references to the rabbit culture, because it's about like anthropomorphic rabbits whose land is being destroyed by humans who are making way for a highway or a neighborhood or something. And the rabbits are at war with each other over land, and it's very human in that way in terms of the land disputes, but the rabbits have their own like lore and mythology. And while I was reading that, I was also reading a lot of Carl Jung and talking about the different archetypes. And I had this realization that like the archetypes for the rabbits would be radically different than the archetypes for the humans, because the ways that the rabbits have evolved to handle life on Earth, the way that they've adapted to the problems of living on Earth, are totally different than us. They're pure prey animals, whereas we are kind of like mostly predators, but often prey as well. And so whereas human archetypes often bend towards like power and heroics, and like you go into the cave to fight the dragon in all of our mythological stories, rabbit stories might be more like the guy who ran away the fastest is the greatest hero of the rabbits. The archetypal hero rabbit is the one who has the fastest legs to get away. So yes, you're right, it's different depending on the creature. But the point I was trying to make was that like since the beginning of time, we've been trying to figure out how to live best on Earth. We had like ancient shamanistic and like mythological deep time religious ideas to try to pass along information about how to live, which eventually turned into organized religions, which eventually started to sprout out into like philosophy that wasn't dependent on the religious stuff all the time. Of course, if it's like Aquinas, it is religious, but as you get further in time, you can abandon the religious stuff as we get more secular. And then eventually that crosses over with science. And then we start getting philosophy, science, and then clinical. And you start getting into kind of what we're doing, which is still thinking about the same questions about how to live, but as therapists who are legitimized by science ostensibly. But we're kind of doing the same thing that the shamans were doing like thousands of years ago, which is trying to figure out how best to live, just exploring it from a different angle. And I see a through line through all of that, which brings me back to the pragmatism of like, if asking these questions is helpful to you, as it is helpful to me, and just having space to explore it and to see new things and like become more aware of what my consciousness allows for and what's available to it, that's amazing. And hopefully it helps you. But if it's more helpful to have you and your parents sit in a room with me doing family therapy and like coming up with a new way of speaking to each other, that's also great. You know, this is mostly about the pragmatism of learning how to live comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. And also earlier in our conversation, you could even tell, listeners probably could tell, like as I was talking about something that's very difficult to like pin down or to describe, I started to sort of unravel. Like I'm like I can't get to where I want to go. I know where I want to go, and I can't do it with this language. Pragmatism is like ground. Your ground. You can like, all right, left or right, like which one looks better and why. And pragmatism is just, it's a lot more useful of a, I don't even have to call it a tool, but
well, especially oh, sorry, I cut you off.
Guiding philosophy. I'm down with William James and radical pragmatism. I really, because you don't waste energy, you don't leak energy debating what's real or what isn't. Right. You're just like, does it work?
Yes, especially since if you've listened to all of this and you've thought like, I don't know what to believe.
Zach, this is a clip. The clip just started right now.
And you're remaining agnostic, like me. I am super agnostic about all this stuff. I make no truth claims about any of this. It's just interesting to me. And I have found there are many ways in which being open to this has been pragmatically useful for me in terms of lowering my anxiety, evaporating my death anxiety for sure. making me motivating me to be more engaged with things like the tree in my backyard, just like getting in touch. And it feels good to do that. Not like the ego wants me to be someone who can like sit and be like, oh, look at me, I'm so Lululemon yoga under this tree. But like, I genuinely feel motivated to do that, not because I think anyone's watching and will see me as enlightened, but because I'm actually just enjoying feeling the breeze and can really access that without worrying about other stuff from the day. It's been pragmatically useful for helping me access living life in a way that feels better to me, right? And I remain completely agnostic about what any of it means. I'm open to matter then consciousness, or consciousness and then matter, and then anything else. I'm open to aliens, UAPs. I'd love to see an alien for real. I'm so down for that. I'm so ready. I write science fiction, as you know, so I'm just like, I'm like ready for that to happen. And if it doesn't, so be it. But I heard from Bashar 2027 was the year. I'm still,
well, you know, but you hear again, and people might naturally, we would understand if they associate to all the things like, oh, the earth is going to end in 2012, or oh, Jesus is coming back in this year. People make all sorts of claims and then they fizzle out. They don't happen, or at least maybe they happen for someone, and then but you don't get to share that experience.
Bashar,
I don't know.
Bashar hedged, by the way, in the interview. He said, well, they've said between 2020 and 2033 for years, and it kept narrowing down until we got to 2027 as the year. And if it doesn't happen, then I'm sure Bashar will tell me like about the deal with that and how much longer we'll have to wait. And I was thinking to myself, like, is he saying 2027 because he's worried about like recessions and he's trying to like fill his pockets with people running to him for answers?
He's saying 2027 because that's when his book comes out.
Right. I mean, like, right. There's a financial incentive here for him to build up energy around 2026, 2027. Maybe he's even getting a little bit of money from the new movie, the new Spielberg movie coming out
this summer.
What is it? What's it called?
Disclosure. Is it just called Disclosure?
It's called Disclosure Day, I think.
Yeah,
Disclosure Day. So he's like, 2026 disclosure, like maybe he's getting a handout from, because by the way, we can't forget about money. That exists. that's a part of all of this and how we show and express our values in the world. Anyways,
Zach, because you are a sci-fi author, and I it's very easy to I don't know if it's fair to call it eating up the time, because I've enjoyed it very much, but time goes by very fast. And there's, like I said, remember earlier when I was like, this is a choose your own adventure. This is Bandersnatch with Zack Be, and I've just decided to stay in this spiritual dimension. But I want to ask you, I guess there is a bridge here, top for these topics, but you are a sci-fi writer, and I'm curious how you are metabolizing what our culture is experiencing regarding I don't know if you saw the Age of Disclosure documentary, where the higher ups, Rubio being one of the notable people, but other people in Congress who have clearance, they're saying, I can't talk about it, it's classified, but I have access. And they're kind of saying, I remember one of them said something like this: if the public found out about this, it would change everything. It would change everything. And people would, it sounded like more than one person was relating the aliens to spiritual phenomena. Like you were saying earlier, deities, but in our modern, now we're just like, we're going to call them aliens, but like,
sure.
Yeah. How are you metabolizing all of what's being talked about regarding
I think
the aliens?
Most recently, Representative Burchett, I think, was saying that like he'd been briefed on a bunch of stuff recently that was keeping him up at night, and if people only knew, like society would become unglued. But we need to disclose this. So it's a very interesting kind of thing. It's like there's a bit of fear mongering. There's a bit of like freedom of information. There's a bit of spirituality. The spirituality thing is interesting to me. It could be that spirituality is, how do I explain this? That spirituality up until now has been our best explanation for what people in the past have seen or experienced of whatever this phenomenon is. But as people often say of organized religion, all of those explanations are written by man, and they're insufficient to describe whatever this is. And perhaps there's a more, I like science, perhaps there's a more scientifically ingestible explanation for what we have seen in history that we described using religion. That doesn't blow religion away. That just means some of the stuff that we talked about today with like, you know, consciousness and how it all fits into reality may play a role in explaining what these things are, UAPs or aliens or whatever they are, right? So it's weird that I personally have been having more and more interaction with this like deep consciousness kind of thinking while this UAP stuff has been taking off. I wonder if they're connected or not, or I don't know. But there's of course the skeptic here who comes in and says it's curious that this is all taking off right now, right? There's another part that said there's one part that says could we be about to get big answers or just big questions that look like answers but they're even bigger questions about what all of this is going on, or are we about to really tumble into the like AI fake nightmare world of not knowing even less about what reality is, and that this is all a big like lead up, you know, they call it like Project Blue Book or whatever that you may have heard of, where it's like CIA plot to confuse everybody into thinking that it's an AI threat. I'm sorry, an alien threat, for, you know, socio-political reasons. Like, I just have no idea.
Well, people would have to have experiences not on a screen. If they went out into their front yard or went out onto Main Street, right, and they had an experience without a screen, that would be palpable and say this isn't AI. This is, but they might question their brain chemistry, you know. Again, because in a secular culture, you might be like, oh, like did I eat bad food? Like what?
What is
versus versus in different cultural contexts, you're like, oh, I know who you are.
The most simple thing I can say is, from a ethics perspective, even if it causes major global disruptions, I think we deserve to know. If somebody knows something that could be revealed, I think we deserve to know. I think it's going to be a test of how mature we are as people to be able to ingest that information versus reject it if there is real information to be revealed. But I think it is time for us to know, unless it's all a very sophisticated. Now, the other thing is like, is the government really sophisticated enough to make this kind of lie work? And I don't know. I would, if it is a big lie put forward by the government for some reason or another, I think it's probably actually a very small lie, and then we all just do the work for them. You and I are talking about this on a podcast apropos of no experience or information that either of us have, and yet we're creating even more content to stir the pot. So it could also just be that you do a couple of little funny things in the 1950s, and then you just let society roll with the crazy for decades after that. Could be that too, right? Drop a few hints here and there, stir the pot in society, get people really interested in this alien stuff. But there's also a lot of potentially trustworthy information coming from these like no nonsense pilots that keep appearing in front of Congress and on podcasts saying that they've seen this shit up close. So I don't know.
How has it influenced you as a writer? Has this been giving you a lot of fodder for stories, or like?
Actually, the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, definitely the opposite. That it's like, do you really, this is very cynical, but it's like, do you really want to invest a year writing a novel involving aliens if next year you're going to find out what the real aliens are and then your novel's pointless, right? That's obviously that's a joke, but there's a little bit of that in there. It's more like, I put it like this: the reality right now between that and AI, reality, and then all the consciousness stuff that we've been exploring, the reality, so to speak, is so interesting that I feel less interested in writing science fiction, even though science fiction is like a really good way of metabolizing or showcasing these ideas. I'm just more interested in that. I find myself dragged into the reality and more interested in that. But again, that could be a distraction from where I ought to be paying attention.
Well, what are you writing about these days?
I mean, I have some stories that I'm working on. I have like a novel outline that I could write that does not involve aliens, that does play actually around with some of the consciousness ideas. I'm also currently working on I'm in the very beginning stages of a pop psychology book. After making fun of it before, I was kind of like, I wonder if I could write something like that where I'll be using my like like prose storytelling skills to make some points about therapy just from my perspective. So I'm working on something that is narrative, grounded in my experience doing therapy, but is more so in like playing with like Baen language, but in a narrative framing or format.
Okay. For people listening to this conversation, do you think you've got a website? And if people are interested in you as Zack the author, where do they find out more about you, or can they buy some of your works? Or
yeah, well, zackbe.com, zackbe.com is my website that I very rarely update, but it is connected to my Instagram. So when I update the Instagram, it more regularly, it shows up there. That's where the sci-fi stuff is. The other book would be far off, right? I do have a story coming out in the July-August issue of Asimov Science Fiction magazine. It's a story about identity, which sounds very pretentious, but basically it's about a guy it's about a world where you can get some stuff put in your brain that makes you better able to remember information and process information, which is good as you get older. You don't have as much degradation, but then questions arise about whether or not you are still you, or if you are the operating system that's running that thing in your brain and you're not you anymore, and how you could possibly tell. And that storyline is played alongside a storyline about a guy who's a insurance claims investigator who is investigating someone who's a human animal hybrid and is part of like basically it's like the trans community, but it's for people who are human animal hybrids, like furries, but for real. And he's coming into awareness of sexual attraction to this group, or like certain people within this group. So it's like kind of playing off these ideas of like knowing who you are, one more conscious level, like knowing that I am or am not attracted to this, and the other is these questions about like what makes someone who they are. If you have this stuff in your brain, are you, or are you the operating system?
I don't think that's. I know you're saying it maybe a little tongue in cheek or something, but you're saying it's pretentious, and yet the first thing that I associate to Zack with identity is knowing who you really are. If you remember who you really are, the whole like how to live a human life is that problem's already solved. You don't have to figure out how to live a human life. If you now that again, that's a claim. So I'm speaking directly to your skeptic here. Like the idea, like I've heard there's a conversation between. Do you know Kristen Neff? She's all about self-compassion.
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah. She was having a conversation with Dick Schwartz, and because they're so long experienced and deep in the field of helping people, healing people, wisdom tradition stuff, they were not trying to dumb it down to a lay audience. And I loved that, because I was just like, one of the conversations or talking points that happened, Kristen goes, so is it like that it sounds like the parts just forgot who they really are? And Dick goes, that's exactly right. And the reason why that makes sense to me is in IFS, there's a contrast between self and parts. Self energy is Atman, is Holy Spirit, is Buddha nature. It is God consciousness. Self is God consciousness, which is why self doesn't judge. It doesn't want to punish. It doesn't want to scare. It has forgiveness for everyone forever. So nothing but loving compassion, which is very healing. And then parts are not that. Parts are skeptics. Parts are managers. Parts are drug abusers. Parts are all sorts of stuff. Parts are parents, loving parents that are still not self. Okay. Musicians, in flow states that would be like, that is self. There could be like a 90% flow state and like 10% judge, like, oh, I just fucked that up, but like I can bend the string and no one will know. Like a technician part, right? Okay. So she says this. She's like, oh, parts are just parts forgot who they are. Because yeah, parts have self in them too. And so when you say identity, it's a book on identity. I'm like, and when you talk about like trying to remember something, like, who am I? Am I the operating system? Like, it's kind of like when people have that awakening, when they realize who they are is not the dominant manager part that's been leading their life for years and years and years, that has been doing the therapy, that, you know, that has been, and sometimes that can be really destabilizing, which is why it's so important not to impose this stuff on people. Again, people have to find out for themselves. They can't be, they don't upload something because you install it. They have to willingly eat the seed, ingest the seed. They have to.
Well, people who read this story will see IFS language in there.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
You know, I'm critical of IFS. They will hear that IFS language in there and be like very, very intentionally, and be like, oh, if they know it, they'll see it. Kind of like, but one thing I wanted to say about that. First of all, the reason I say it's pretentious is because I have I guess a trigger. I don't know, where I see other authors when they're talking about their stories on X or Blue Sky or wherever they are now, they'll always be like, I have a new story coming out in this magazine. It's a story of like intergenerational trauma, identity, and war. And it's like, shut up. Like, I don't know why it pisses me off so much. I'm like, I don't care. I'll read your story, but I don't care. Don't tell me the themes. Just let me read the fucking story. Tell me the plot, maybe, but like, don't treat me like a child, which so many authors do to their audiences. And maybe this is a publishing thing where the publishing world feels like, we need to signal to the audience what's going to be in this story so that they'll be willing to read it. But it just, for whatever reason, it sounds so self-important when people say like, it's a story about theme. And I see that exact rhythm in posts again and again and again. And I find it very annoying for some reason. It triggers me. You could probably say what part of me it triggers. I don't know what it is. It's not.
I think it's very perceptive for you to assume that it's a publisher, especially because if you see a pattern and it shows up again and again and again, how is that going to be independent author?
I think probably the initial impulse comes from publishers at the higher end, but I actually think a lot of it is authors who want to feel important or want to feel like their work is on the level of something else they've seen. They copy the language structure. So like if I
hear you.
If I say it like this is a story about identity and culture and theme, it makes them seem like they're like, they're in
the club. They're in the club.
Attempt to elevate the work falsely, maybe. Just let me read the story and decide if it's, if it is elevated or not. But of course, this is just some weird internal part of me that is reactive to this, because I've felt the pressure maybe before from like, I don't know where, to do the same thing, and I chose not to, and I was happy that I didn't. But then I see those things and I'm like, ugh, like eye roll, entitled author.
Yeah, but the moment you said that, I shared in the laughter, right? Which means I get it. and you have every right to scoff.
You know what it is? It's very, very, you will know this as a musician. It's very similar to when you ask a musician what kind of music they make. They say like, oh, it's like an experimental mix of alt rock and indie rock. And I'm like, no, like you can't just say it's experimental and then it's just a Radiohead song that you aped. Like,
well, it's trying to use language to you're saying like, if I'm in the Mall of America, like I'm around this store, or it's like shopping at this store and this store versus like the 98 other stores,
See, this is where I disagree with you. To me, it's like you're standing outside the store with your little kiosk cart and you're saying, here's why my kiosk is different. Like, yes, it's the same store.
They don't even have a store. They're a kiosk
store. They're like, you're standing in front of the I don't even know, you're standing in front of a Slurpee store, and then you have Slurpees in your cart, and you're like, see, but my Slurpee is really a mix of that Slurpee store and that Slurpee store, and it's like, It's still a Slurpee. I like.
Okay, let me ask you.
Yeah.
You said the pop psychology book is somewhere off in the. Is it going to be on?
Right now, but
You're writing it right now. Is it going to be? Are you going to distribute it or sell it? Can people find out about it a year from now, or whenever you publish it? Will they be able to go to your website? Like, do you have? Because you exist. I mean, you have multiple identities, right? But yours, the website you plugged, doesn't it capture all of your, well, not all, but the main identities that you want to be seen by the public?
I'm gonna have to figure out what to do about that, because my musician and prose author identity is Zack Be, as written here, but my therapist identity is Zack Berman, or Dr. Zack, and that is not like typically represented in the same places. That was intentional to begin with.
Yeah.
Because I've had weird situations. Like, I've been in a therapy session before, and my couple that I was working with, they were giggling, and they were like, we were eating lunch with his his parents, and we opened up the weekend section, and we saw a picture of you in the weekend section because that show coming up, and we were giggling like, our therapist is in the newspaper, but not for being a therapist, for being a musician.
Right.
So I initially kept them separate on purpose, just for ease of use. But obviously now, if I was going to write a book that was grounded in the therapy side, would I just do my name, because that's the name I operate under professionally, because it's my legal name and I kind of have to, versus doing it under the sci-fi guy name, which is,
there's no rule that says you can't have multiple websites. I kind of like, I kept the podcast and my therapy practice two different worlds and kept them apart until one day I was like, no, I mean, I know if the podcast was predominantly therapy, that would make sense to just synergize all that, but it's not. And yet I still was like, yeah, all this segmenting, I was like, for someone who believes in integration as a good thing,
that's a good point.
I was like, let me embody that, and whatever, just where the chips fall, they'll fall, I think one of my biggest fears, confession time, that's this segment. One of my biggest fears, we'll clip it. I'm sorry. one of my biggest fears, or was, is it still? Maybe it is that like someone who would otherwise choose to work with me, they say like, okay, like I see people, like he's got good reviews, or so-and-so recommended him, or whatever.
Right.
But like, I know like the consumer wants to do many consumers want to do their research and their homework and like vet you and check you out. And so there's a fear. It's natural to understand that there's a fear that like they would find the podcast and then click on just like any random show, especially in the first season. No, I don't do seasons, but like early, like when I was in the first year or two, maybe showing,
our first episode.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but like I wasn't inebriated on that episode.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
So I'm saying like maybe an episode where I'm not sober, right? And like just speaking cavalierly about that, and then they're like, this guy still has his life, or like like I don't want to work with him. So just like, but that's like a scarcity mindset. It's like a fear of I can't live. Fear can be a wise guide for sure, but yeah, that just doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't resonate anymore. And I made the conscious decision to be like, all right, let me just like promote the podcast in the newsletter. I'm like slowly integrating it. Like if there's no section on my website that has the podcast yet, it's like if you go to the bio, it's like Robin, like he likes to podcast, and then it was like, we'll do a hyperlink. It's just like slowly getting it. So I'm slowly shedding that nature of having to segment, and just it's a lot easier to have it integrated. Before we go, because I need to stop it for you got to go. I did not mean to burn up this much time and not ask you about music. Of all the faces, the multifaceted beings of Zack Be, what's with you? What's new with you in the music front? I mean, you talked about the clients were giggling, or so. How do you get musical satisfaction these days? What projects are you in? Are there new tracks that I can link to and share, or even drop a track in the episode? Like, What's keeping you busy musically, Zach?
We should have started talking about this earlier, because it's become such a complicated topic in my life, because as I've become more invested in some of these more like consciousness, philosophical areas, and as I've started to invest in thinking about what's the clinical pathway I'm taking? Am I going to open my own practice, eventually, or am I going to write a book and then see where that takes me? Am I going to do more of the teaching that because I teach at UMD, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and I feel really like motivated. I feel motivated towards therapy and what all that feels like, almost the same way as I feel about music, or have felt about music in the past, where I felt like the fire of like, oh, I'm good at this and I like doing this, and it feels good to do the actual thing, to sit in the room with the client and be on the edge of my seat. Like, I'm into, like, when you play piano, a lot of people don't know this. When you learn to play piano at like classical piano or jazz piano, sitting down, they train the pianist to sit at the edge of that big seat that they sit on, as though you're about to stand up, the bench, as though you're about to stand up, because that body positioning is actually telling your whole body, like, get ready to jump into the music and like really get into it. And I feel that way in therapy sessions too, where I'm like, I'm here and I'm focused and I'm like in the zone, and it feels similar. It feels like riding the same wave. I probably said before, I may have even said it on this podcast before, but they're actually very similar. It's like there's tempo, and there's key signature, and there's time signature, and then there's like genre, and there's rules of those genres, or idioms within those genres, and whatever. There's all these like kind of theoretical things in the background, but when you actually get out and play on the stage with the other musicians and / with the audience, there's this sort of chaos that's happening where, like, what you're supposed to be doing technically, but you're taking off in these different directions based on what's going on around you. And therapy is like exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing. So where there's rules and there's theory and there's all this kind of stuff, and then in the room, like, anything could happen, right? But you're still guided by the intuitions that have been shaped by all the theory and all the practice. Same thing, same wave riding, same excitement, smaller audience, but same excitement. The audience is just for the ego anyways, right? But anyway, so somewhere in that, and in my getting super burnt out by that PhD that I did, which was just like, both I learned a lot and got a lot smarter, and also it was a real drag in a lot of ways. That we don't have time for, but if you want to do a whole episode about how bad grad school is, I would be happy to oblige. And especially grad school in 2025. And then, which was when I graduated. This is 2026, obviously. And then the music stuff, like my relationship with music radically changed when I left Pretty Bitter, for reasons that are basically grounded in, they wanted to do things with the band and with their lives in general that like didn't necessarily suit my life path. Like, they were more comfortable living in a van and driving around and being on tour for a month, which is awesome for some. Yeah. But I have a dog and a life and a job, and I just didn't really want to do that kind of stuff. I didn't really want to sign the contract that we had, because I didn't think it was good for me to sign the contract. And I don't know, just like we're just diverting. We were diverting for a long time in terms of our needs. And at that point I left the project, and they went off in their own direction. And in the aftermath of that, plus everything I just said about what I've been busy doing, I have not felt very motivated to make any music. Now, ironically, back in 2022, I made a record with my friend Graham Robertson. Our band is called Last Seen Alive. It's baritone sax through effects pedals like distortion, me on keyboards doing synth bass with one hand and keys with the other, and then a really great drummer. And we made that record back in like 22, 23, then didn't do anything with it for a while because we were looking for maybe a label, or we didn't know what to do. It finally came out this year, and we're actually going to like be in Prague magazine in the coming weeks, which is like pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Zach is like, oh my God, like in the same pages as Genesis and Yes. Oh my God. Like, there's definitely a part of me that feels that excitement, but it's weird because it's almost like a zombie that's hanging over from back when I cared more about music. And now I'm in this weird place where like music is my social outlet. Like a lot of my friends are musicians. A lot of my going out is like I'm playing a show as the keyboard player or the bass player in one of my friends' bands. But I really have to decide between the book and everything else that I might, and either book, either the prose book or nonfiction book, and anything else that I want to do I have space and time for some of the musical dreams I used to have, and really reckoning with, this is funny, I'm bringing all this up as we run out of time, but really
Doorknob client.
big time, really reckoning with what does the music making mean to me now, right? Because if it's about ego, I can get those needs met through the book stuff, which might be more connected to actual like money and whatever else, right? Because there's maybe better pathways for me and my, like I have more letters. I have the same number of letters after my name as I have in my name at this point, which is, so perhaps I can leverage that in a way that I can't leverage anything related to music for financial gain, if that's what I'm after, for ego, if that's what I'm after. For music, it's like the doing of it is nice, but like I said, I like the doing of the therapy already also. So then with music, it's like what it's different still obviously than therapy, but like what is it to me now, and what do I want to do? And I have all these skills that I built over multiple decades for playing different instruments and recording and producing and all this kind of stuff, and playing live and all these different skills in all these different little places in the music world. But what do I want to do with it at this point? And the main thing that continues to hover over me is my long gestating banjo album that I keep saying I'm going to make one of these days. Here's my lovely banjo, right? Long gestating banjo album that I would want to make, but it would be to what end? And that's where I keep getting stuck. Right? Is like, if I did go and put all the effort and energy into making that record, to what end? Do I just plop it into the endless Spotify slop world where no one will ever hear it? Do I put a lot of energy and money? Because now that I've been in the music world, I know how much energy would be needed to make it actually be heard by people. But do I need to do that? Do I want to do that? Or do I put that energy and money behind writing a book that could take me somewhere else? And I don't know what to do with that.
May I give your ego an invitation?
Yes.
Bring this full circle.
Yeah.
In a nice, neat little bow.
Yeah.
Hire a quantum healing hypnotherapist who will put you in the somnambulistic trance state and record the session so that your soul or your subconscious tells you the answer to all of these things. And then your skeptic can listen to that recording and make what he wants of it.
I'm going to need a script written for that, because that was just like, I know what you're talking about, but
this is recorded. Just play it back.
I'll get the transcript, but it's like,
let's cut to a clip.
Very fun. I don't even think I could repeat what you just said. Quantum hypnotist, is that what you said?
Quantum healing hypnotherapy technique. Dolores Cannon.
That's actually the title of the book that I'm the prose sci-fi book, Quantum Hypnotist. That's the.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
Are you pulling my leg?
Yes, obviously.
My skeptic wasn't around.
The non-pulling. Okay. The prose book is actually about a talking dog. That's true. So I mean, that's.
Is her name Misty?
No, her name is Io, like the moon.
Okay. Which moon is Io? Is that Jupiter?
Yeah, Saturn maybe. I forget. Jupiter. It's Jupiter. Yeah.
So okay. So we gotta. Anything else before we wrap this up, Zach? Because I got so many like pins in the map for next time. I regret that we are limited beings and we have time constraints. But anything else before we wrap it up to send people to?
I mean, I think if people are interested in hearing some type of music that they've never really heard before, I would encourage them to listen. I can't believe I'm doing this after everything I just said, but listening to the Last Scene Alive record, it's called World Class Pep Talk. You can find it on any streaming service. The band is a Last Scene Alive, scene as in like movie scene, as opposed to SE. It's SCENE.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different kind of thing than you might be used to hearing. It's aggressive but jazzy. There's no guitars except for one song, so it's a different kind of thing. It's interesting.
Okay, all right. And also, If people want to book a session with you, where can they find you?
I work at Harmony Holistic LLC in the DC area, about Maryland or Virginia. Anybody there I could see. And I don't know why am I blanking on here? Oh, I have offices in downtown Rockville and in North Bethesda, but also can do virtual sessions. I mostly do couples therapy, and then I focus a lot on men's sexual health. And lately I've been getting a lot of infidelity stuff. I think that's becoming a niche, oddly enough.
Yeah. You're also licensed in Virginia. So you are, and if there are any MFT nerds listening to this who are looking for a supervisor and like the cut of your jib, are you taking on new supervisees?
Yeah, I take on new supervisees.
Yeah,
so I should mention, I also teach the couples therapy course at University of Maryland and the sex therapy course at University of Maryland for the marriage and family therapists. And I'm also, I don't know, I've been supervising there for like 4 or 5 years or something like that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and yes, I am taking new supervisees if people are looking.
Yeah, Zach, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.